or more than a century, the world's longest undefended border has stood as a powerful symbol of trust and friendship between Canada and the United States. Stretching over 8,800 kilometers, it has been a testament to the unique relationship between two neighboring nations, one built on mutual respect, shared values, and a deep sense of cooperation. For generations, this border has been more than just a line on a map. It's been a handshake, not a barrier, enabling the free flow of people, goods, and culture. Families have lived on both sides, businesses have thrived on cross-border trade, and communities have grown together, often blurring the line that separates them. But on this August day in 2025, that trust is fraying. The atmosphere at the border is tense, and the sense of ease that once defined this crossing is rapidly disappearing. What was once unimaginable, a hardened border between these two allies, is now unfolding in real time. Tensions are rising along the vital corridors connecting the U.S. to Alaska, turning a route of passage into a geopolitical flashpoint. The Alaska Highway, once a symbol of cooperation during World War II, is now at the center of a growing standoff, with traffic snarling and uncertainty mounting for those who depend on this lifeline. The spark: President Trump's threat of sweeping tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods, forcing Canada to consider a robust response. The announcement has sent shockwaves through both countries, with businesses, politicians, and ordinary citizens bracing for the fallout of a potential trade war. At the heart of the conflict lies Alaska's unique vulnerability: its reliance on Canadian territory for access to the rest of the United States. Any disruption along this route threatens not just commerce, but the daily lives of Alaskans who depend on the highway for everything from food and fuel to medical supplies. Canada, feeling cornered by the sudden escalation, is now leveraging its geography as a powerful bargaining chip, signaling that cost-free passage may soon end. The message is clear: Canada will not stand by while its interests are threatened. The situation has escalated from diplomatic murmurs to overt legislative action, with provinces taking the lead in defending their interests. Provincial leaders are pushing for new laws and regulations, determined to protect their economies and assert their sovereignty in the face of mounting pressure. The once unthinkable prospect of Canada impeding access to Alaska is now a reality. As border gates close and travelers are left stranded, both nations are forced to confront the cracks in their celebrated alliance, raising urgent questions about the future of the world's longest peaceful border and the true cost of broken trust. Canada's response to U.S. tariffs isn't just a matter for the federal government, it's a coordinated effort that stretches across the provinces, each taking bold steps to defend their interests and send a unified message. This provincial pushback is reshaping the conversation around cross-border trade and economic relations. British Columbia, serving as the main land bridge to Alaska, has introduced new legislation aimed at imposing tolls on all commercial traffic moving to and from Alaska. This move is designed to directly impact American businesses that rely on this vital route, signaling that access to Canadian infrastructure comes with conditions when trade relations are threatened. In the Yukon, the response has been swift and pointed. The territory has halted all American liquor purchases and has gone a step further by restricting U.S. companies from bidding on lucrative government contracts. These measures are intended to hit American businesses where it hurts, while also rallying local support for a strong stance against U.S. trade actions. Ontario, meanwhile, is leveraging its role as a major energy supplier. The province plans to introduce a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the U.S., specifically targeting states that are heavily dependent on Canadian power. This policy is a calculated move to remind American partners of their reliance on Canadian resources. These aren't just symbolic gestures or political posturing, they're carefully crafted policies designed to inflict real reciprocal economic discomfort. Each province is using its unique strengths to maximize the impact of its response. The provinces are sending a clear and unmistakable message: if the U.S. chooses protectionism, economic pain will be mutual. This approach is about more than just retaliation. It's about defending Canadian jobs, industries, and communities. This decentralized resistance forms a united Canadian front, using the country's vast geography and abundant resources as powerful leverage. By acting together, the provinces amplify their influence and demonstrate the strength of Canadian federalism. These actions are strategic, not merely reactionary. They're meant to pressure Washington into reconsidering its approach, while also defending Canadian sovereignty and the long-term interests of its people. Canada is making it clear: it will not be a passive recipient of American economic aggression. Instead, it stands ready to defend its economy, its workers, and its future, no matter how tough the challenge. At the core of Canada's strategy is British Columbia's Economic Stabilization, Tariff Response Act. This law empowers the province to levy tolls on commercial trucks and ferries bound for Alaska, ready to activate if U.S. tariffs become reality. The infrastructure for tolling is already in place, making implementation swift and feasible. The act is temporary, set to expire in 2027, and designed as a deterrent, not an immediate escalation. For Alaska-bound supply chains, the impact would be immediate, costs passed on to consumers and businesses. The legislation has already unsettled the shipping industry, introducing new uncertainty. It's a calculated risk, leveraging geography for economic defense, while risking further strain with the U.S. British Columbia's move signals that frictionless transit can no longer be assumed in an era of aggressive protectionism. For Alaska, these tensions threaten its economic lifeline. The state's unique geography means it relies heavily on the smooth flow of goods and people across international borders. With its remote location and limited infrastructure, Alaska is more vulnerable than most to disruptions in trade and travel. While most cargo arrives by sea, land routes through British Columbia and the Yukon are vital for time-sensitive goods and critical supplies. These highways are the arteries that keep Alaskan communities stocked with everything from fresh produce to medical equipment. Without reliable access, even basic necessities can become scarce. Any disruption means higher prices and operational headaches for Alaskan businesses and families. Store owners struggle to keep shelves stocked, and families are forced to pay more for everyday items. In remote towns, a delayed shipment can mean waiting weeks for essentials, creating anxiety and frustration. The tourism sector is also at risk. Alaska's cruise industry depends on stops in British Columbia. Each summer, thousands of visitors arrive by ship, fueling local economies and supporting countless jobs. If these routes are interrupted, the ripple effects would be felt from bustling ports to small businesses that rely on tourist dollars. U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan has threatened to seek a waiver of the Passenger Vessel Services Act, allowing cruise ships to bypass Canadian ports entirely. This move is seen as a last resort, but it underscores the seriousness of the situation and the lengths Alaska is willing to go to protect its interests. This would devastate British Columbia's cruise industry, costing billions and harming coastal communities. Towns that depend on the seasonal influx of tourists would face economic hardship, with businesses shuttering and jobs lost. The impact would be felt far beyond the docks, affecting families and entire regions. The economies of Alaska and British Columbia are deeply intertwined. A blow to one hurts the other. Decades of cooperation have built strong ties, and both sides benefit from open borders and shared prosperity. Disputes like this threaten to unravel that delicate balance. Alaskans now face rising costs, potential shortages, and a stark reminder of their dependence on Canadian routes. For many, it's a wake-up call about the fragility of supply chains and the importance of international cooperation in daily life. The dispute has made clear how geopolitical tensions can quickly impact everyday life. From grocery aisles to grand cruise ships, the effects ripple through communities, highlighting just how connected and vulnerable Alaska and its neighbors truly are. President Trump's response has been swift and incendiary, framing Canada's actions as unprovoked aggression. He's targeted Prime Minister Trudeau, escalating the dispute into a battle of national pride. Trump's rhetoric energizes his base, casting the U.S. as a victim and justifying further retaliation. This public pressure makes compromise difficult, as both sides dig in. For Alaskans, Trump's stance is reassuring, but also raises the stakes, increasing uncertainty. The president's fury has spotlighted the issue, but risks burning the diplomatic bridges needed for resolution. Canadian leaders insist their actions are defensive, not aggressive, direct responses to U.S. tariff threats. Yukon and British Columbia officials stress their measures aren't aimed at Alaskans, but at U.S. federal policy. The principle is reciprocity. If the U.S. weaponizes trade, Canada must respond. Ottawa supports the provinces, presenting a united front and preparing its own retaliatory tariffs. The message, an attack on one part of Canada, is an attack on all. Canada's goal remains a fair, stable trading relationship, but not at the expense of sovereignty. Defensive measures are a reluctant but necessary stand against what they see as unwarranted American hostility. Despite talk of a blockade, Canada isn't sealing the border. Traffic still flows. The measures, like tolls, are economic deterrents, not physical barriers, and fall within Canada's sovereign rights. International law supports Canada's authority to regulate its own infrastructure. No treaty guarantees the U.S. toll-free access to Alaska. Legal experts agree. This is a political and economic dispute, not a legal violation. The term blockade is a misnomer. These are regulatory measures, not acts of war. Canada cites environmental management and Indigenous rights as additional justifications for new transit rules. The U.S. can't challenge these measures in court. Negotiation is the only path forward. Canada is reminding its neighbor that sovereignty means control over its own borders and policies. Beneath the economic standoff are deeper issues: environmental protection and Indigenous rights. The Alaska Highway cuts through sensitive wilderness and First Nations territories, raising concerns about pollution and cultural impacts. Canadian officials now cite environmental management as a reason for new transit regulations, aligning domestic goals with trade leverage. Indigenous communities demand consultation, as increased traffic affects their lands and traditions. Any long-term solution must address these voices and concerns. The dispute is no longer just bilateral, it's entangled with domestic responsibilities Canada cannot ignore. Even if tariffs are resolved, debates over the Alaska corridor's future will persist. The Alaska access conflict has brought North America to a crossroads, testing decades of trust and cooperation. The stakes go beyond trade, they challenge the very model of continental partnership. Quiet diplomacy is underway, but a prolonged conflict risks permanent damage to supply chains and cross-border collaboration. The episode is a stark reminder of mutual dependence. American prosperity relies on Canadian resources, and vice versa. The core question, is this relationship transactional, or a true partnership built on shared stability? The outcome will define the continent's future. A resolution based on respect could reaffirm the alliance, a trade war would unravel it. The world is watching how Canada and the U.S. navigate this test of their historic bond.